Assalamu alaikum and peace. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. We're on Galaxy 19 satellite, covering USA, Canada, and Mexico, coast to coast, 57 million subscribers there. Also on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire TV. And always on muslimnetwork.tv, which is our website. Today, elections are happening. Whole lot of people, 58.6 million people have already voted. That's more than all the people in 2016 voted before the elections. And 500,000 people have signed up to become first-time poll workers. Poll workers, whenever I go to vote, are people of my age or older who are guiding how to vote. But this time, more people are younger people who are showing up. America is set to break some records this election. Let's keep watching. 9 more days to go, and hopefully it settles there. In the meantime, unfortunately, we also have the highest level of infections since the pandemic began. Some hospitals are already full, and people are worried. Scientists are saying another 200,000 people. We're already more than 225,000 deaths. People are saying it may go even above that. So we will be discussing today and a whole lot of things with not people of my age group, but a young person who is a political activist, now working for a not-for-profit organization, mobilizing people to vote. And he's a national manager of student poll workers at Fair Election Center. Spencer Reed, welcome to Muslim Network TV, Spencer.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Where did you pick up Assalamu alaikum?
Oh, I took a couple of years of Arabic when I was in college. I mean, my Arabic is very poor, and I only speak a little bit of MSA, but it's a beautiful language.
Well, you went to University of Chicago. Why University of Chicago do a little bit of Arabic?
It seemed like something new to try, and it was. I had an amazing professor, and I learned a great deal from him. And I've always had a great deal of interest in Arab culture and in Arabic, the language, and I'm very glad I took it. My professor was Ustad Osama. Oh my God, I'm forgetting his last name right now. But
he was teaching Arabic there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Well, we went to the same school. I hope we have some of the same teachers. Which department were you in?
I studied political science and history.
Way. That's what I studied. Pick off.
Really?
Pick off.
That's funny.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know how many of older professors are still there. I've studied there before you were born.
But Pick Hall, I'm very intimately familiar with. Not the most beautiful building on campus, but one that I grew to love.
No, nothing Gothic about it. It just it's a patch of modernity there.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how you became interested in politics and elections and all of that. Where did you pick up the bug?
Yeah, so it was something I always had some level of interest in when I was younger, but I think the point at which it became personal for me, I took a gap year before I went to college, and I worked with a program called City Year, which is an AmeriCorps program. So I was working in a classroom in Philadelphia in a 6th grade class with a number of really amazing students. And that was a time when I realized the true stakes of politics. I saw both the value and importance of taking action individually to help each other and to, perform acts of service and in community with others. But I also saw the limits of that. And so I saw that the effects of racism and poverty were enormous and deeply personal to people that I grew to care a great deal about. And so I reached the conclusion that the only way to address those ills and to affect change in our society was through collective action in politics. And I sort of developed that view in my time at the University of Chicago, seeing among many other things. I did a great deal of work in education there as well. And so seeing the disparity between Hyde Park and the university, which is extremely well funded and wealthy, and then the schools that I was working with just a few blocks away, but that were suffering from enormous underfunding and all sorts of other problems, was always a very jarring experience and one that I found very upsetting. So
isn't that a
because I was upset by that.
contrast of the neighborhood at the university?
What's that?
Isn't this as a major contrast between the neighborhood and the university island
Absolutely.
in the middle of it? Which school were you working at?
I was working mostly in schools in Woodlawn, the neighborhood immediately south, which has been, treated very poorly, I think, in a lot of respects by the university.
School was at the Woodlawn Street, or where was it?
It was in the Woodlawn neighborhood. There were a few different schools that I worked with, but I worked with students. A lot of my work was done at actually the university's charter school in Woodlawn, but also with some other traditional public schools in that neighborhood.
Okay, so in that way you got so you aspired to be a politician,
or at least to work in politics. I thought that for myself, and speaking to be very clear, only for myself and not for my employer. But I chose to go work for the Bernie Sanders campaign after I graduated because I thought that if the path to change was through politics, I saw Bernie Sanders as being a leader of the movement that I think it will take to bring those changes. And so after I graduated, I moved out to Iowa to work on that campaign, and then spent some time in some other states after Iowa. Sadly, from my perspective, it didn't work out, but that was my first professional work in the political and election sphere.
Bernie Sanders were relying on a whole lot of younger people. What happened to younger people? I heard, didn't show up.
Yeah, so it was very sad to see. I would say, from what I saw of the data, I think that there was actually an increase in turnout among younger voters from previous years, including from 2016, but it was a smaller increase than the increase among other age groups and older voters in particular. So voter turnout increased across the board, including among younger people, but just not enough to keep pace. Personally, I think that a lot of that, there's a lot of reasons for traditionally younger people turning out at lower rates. I think a really important one is structural barriers to voting. So in my current job, that's something that I deal with all the time. We see the effects of disenfranchisement. We see, I think back to the primaries that I was working in, and when I was in Michigan, for instance, we saw students waiting in lines of up to 6 hours in order to vote on election day. Now, a lot of students can't wait in that line. They've got class, they've got family responsibilities, they've got jobs and people to support. So that is, to me, a form of voter disenfranchisement. And we saw tons of people who would show up, see this line that wraps around the block 3 times and say, I can't wait in that line. I've got class to get to. I've got something else to do. And I think no one should have to wait in that sort of line, but especially younger people who are more prone to moving around, to having to register at new places more frequently, and to have less flexibility because they have less security in their own jobs and in their own positions. That is a real barrier to voting. And I think that things like that really prevent a lot of young people who would like to vote and even try to vote from being able to do so.
So even in Michigan, you felt there was which is led by a Democratic governor, you felt that there was sort of planned way of discouraging younger people to vote?
I don't know that I would say it's planned. I think it's very hard to say in any individual case what the intention of our public officials is, but I would say that when the effect is to systematically disenfranchise some group of people, very often, for instance, Black voters, but young people also certainly of all races face higher barriers to voting typically than people who are older. I think that that's a problem that we can solve, and I would like to see our elected officials of all parties doing a lot more to solve that problem.
But what about taking some blame for the campaign itself, that it thought younger people will come in, but maybe it didn't have enough outreach to younger people? Otherwise, who else has better platform for younger people than Bernie Sanders did?
Yeah, and so again, speaking for myself in my former employment, I would say I think that there are certainly things I would have liked to have seen done differently. I think that as well, honestly, I think outreach to older voters, we saw talking about issues like Social Security and Medicare, expanding access to vision and dental care, for instance, for Medicare recipients. Things like that are really important issues for people of all ages, but also very much for seniors and for older voters, because those issues affect them very directly. So I think that making a very concerted case to win voters of all age demographics is something that I think in many places the campaign did well, but in other places could have improved in. I think also focusing very heavily on the first few states made a lot of sense at the time. I thought the strategy made sense when I was working for the campaign. As it turned out, unfortunately, it didn't seem to be enough. Winning those first several early states, we thought, I think, would carry us through the nomination. And then, of course, we saw the effects of everybody else dropping out and endorsing our opponent come Super Tuesday. So, I think there were enormous barriers to the campaign winning in any world. And I think that there were strategic decisions that, in retrospect, were incorrect. But at the time, I think did make sense. It seemed reasonable to assume that winning the early states would be a pretty solid path to victory.
What about the outreach to African and Black community?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that also relates to the question of age. So we did see, of course, younger Black voters voting pretty heavily for Bernie. And so across the board, it was a lot of the breakdown was in age. But I absolutely think that just like in 2016, in 2020 as well, it is quite clear that there was a divide, I think, in terms of the support among different racial demographics for the campaign. And I think that I agree. Yeah, I think a more concerted effort to make the case that Bernie Sanders had always stood for equal rights and has, as a fellow alum, as we all, I guess, have the same degree, as Bernie Sanders also has a political science degree from the University of Chicago. So his time there when he was getting arrested at civil rights sit-ins, that's a pretty compelling case to me, that from the very beginning of his life, he was very committed to those issues. And I think that could have been highlighted more. I think he was just reluctant to talk about himself, honestly.
Well, could it be that University of Chicago does not teach people how to win elections?
I guess that's a common thread here. It is all theory and no practice. So I didn't learn a whole lot about the practice of elections in my classes there, as much as I did learn about other things.
Yes. You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and we're talking with Spencer Reed, and we will be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Adam. You remember me? I appeared in so many episodes that Sound Vision has put on the market. No matter what. Hey, what's happening? Hey, oh, sorry. Lockdown is what it is. Well, continuing here. In this lockdown, Sound Vision never stops thinking about you, the viewer. We'll have to get back into production again, online and inline. Everybody in their own space, even me. Although I'm stuck with Lanisa.
Salam! Salam! Salam!
I know, you were shocked too. Well, let me continue. This is what I was going to say.
Salam, salam, salam. Cut.
Finally, I get my own screen time again. Thank God. And so we invested in new equipment to bring you even better production with new songs and new singers and animations. Well, here are a few clips. And Sound Vision has brought all this into your home, making Islamic values and teachings easy. And if you know me, Adam, a multi-talented actor, well, sometimes I'm an actor and the reporter and the... Oh, that's enough. Let's move on to the next section. Well, you can watch these new episodes on our new app at www.adamsworldapp.com. We have previews happening every day on Muslim Network TV. Sound Vision has been serving generations, moving and changing with the times. We are all faithfully connected. That is a huge blessing. Your donation helps keep these programs available now and into the future. We take this job of helping tomorrow's Muslims today seriously, and you should too. Today, we need your help. Children absorb and learn from everything they encounter. Make that wholesome, positive, grounded in our faith. Together, we can accomplish our goal of raising better Muslims, better neighbors, and better citizens. Please donate generously. It's an investment in our future. But to finish, let me tell you, there are new scripts of my new mission. And it is something that I enjoy talking about. My new mission is space. Houston, we do not have a problem. Salam, see you soon. You too.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Spencer Raitt, who is a graduate of the University of Chicago and is a national manager of student poll workers at Fair Election Center. Tell us, what is a Fair Election Center?
Great question, and one that took me a little while to be able to answer when I started working with them. So Fair Election Center is a national nonpartisan nonprofit that was originally focused very heavily and still is focused very heavily on election litigation. So protecting and preserving the right to vote, ensuring that no one is illegally denied that right to vote by litigating against places and individuals and groups that try to stand in the way of that. So that's a big, the core of one part of the Fair Election Center's work. There's also within it a number of different projects and sort of sub-organizations, including Work Elections, which is a website dedicated to providing high quality information about how to become a poll worker in just about every jurisdiction in the country, because since elections are administered locally, it's very difficult to figure out how to become a poll worker, or at least it was before Work Elections. So Work Elections has, for a couple of years, been doing the very hard work of gathering that information into one place. There's also the project that I'm a part of, the Campus Vote Project, which is focused on organizing with and mobilizing young voters and students at campuses across the country. So for a number of years, we've been doing that work in a whole bunch of different states, getting students out to vote, lowering barriers to voting, getting polling places on campus, things of that nature. And then my work specifically as the National Manager of Student Poll Workers is the intersection of work elections and Campus Vote Project. So we're recruiting the next generation of student poll workers using the information from work elections and the organizing of Campus Vote Project to recruit so far close to 11,000 students and young people to sign up to be poll workers.
So Fair Election Center, when was it established? Where is it headquartered?
So Fair Election Center is headquartered in Washington, D.C., and I believe was founded in 2006.
And how many people work there? What is its budget size?
That's a good question. I can tell you about how many people work there. I don't do the books, so I can't tell you the exact budget, but there's in the range of 30 to 40 employees. That includes a litigation staff of mostly lawyers, of course, as well as operations, communications, Campus Vote Project team. So something in that range.
And do they provide training to people? For example, this season of election probably is going to be a boom for this organization if it is talking about litigation. Everybody is getting not only litigation, people are getting ready their knives and guns.
Well, not us. We're just focused on doing the legal advocacy to make sure that the law is being followed in a fair and nonpartisan way. But yeah, I think this is a very important year for us. We're seeing, the poll worker issue in particular. We've had a lot of success there in recruiting hundreds of thousands just last week. In fact, Power the Polls overall, the coalition recruiting poll workers this year, has announced we've recruited over 700,000 total signups. So that's a really amazing thing, especially given that in 2016, for instance, there were only about 917,000 poll workers total in the country. So we've recruited almost as many new poll workers as there have been poll workers typically in years before. So this is a really important year in that regard. Similarly, in terms of, we were just talking earlier in a different context about student turnout and young people voting. And I think whatever our political views individually, I think that we can all agree that it's very important that everyone who can votes. And so we've had a lot of very important efforts to get young people out to the polls, focused on organizing them through, student to student communication, having students use their own networks and reaching out on their campus to make sure that everyone that they know and that goes to school with them and that is in this age group is getting out to vote for this absolutely crucial election.
You give a lot of young people who have signed up, but I have seen young people, they sign up. It doesn't mean they're going to show up.
Yes, this is an issue that we've run into in previous years. In fact, there are some election officials who prefer not to have students as poll workers because of that exact concern. And I would say that I think that reflects
nothing to do with their blood. I mean, sometimes they're not mobile. There are other obligations. Parents tell them to do certain things.
Right.
And, it's just the age level in which keeping up the commitment, other than a date, I think is very difficult.
Sure. Well, we're trying to make this as or more exciting than a date, especially since this year we really shouldn't be going on too many dates, I think. But I would say that I think when there's a feeling of ownership and of responsibility and the importance of the project, of the thing that we're doing, I think that young people really can be mobilized to turn up. And so I see that with our program, the Student Poll Worker Program. We have over 110 paid student fellows across the country. And of course, being a poll worker is also a paid position, so that analogy holds. And I've seen those students show up in a really amazing way to do some extremely impressive organizing. They've worked hard. They've spent long hours reaching out extremely aggressively and thoroughly to their campus networks and beyond, stepping up to recruit outside of their own counties when their own counties fill up and there are other counties still in need of poll workers. So I've seen young people step up in a really amazing way that gives me a lot of not only hope, but faith that will continue and that we will be able to rely on those young people to show up on election day. Once they've made this commitment, I think that it will happen. And that's not to say I think follow-up is very important, and we'll be doing a lot of that. So sending reminders and texting and calling people, all of that helps as well. But I really do think that that this year especially, people will be showing up.
Okay, so this year the showing up record will be broken also, hopefully. So since it is more about election litigation, this organization called Fair Election Center, based in Washington, D.C. So are they providing them training how to observe and what to note and how to contribute to lawsuits? I mean, how that observing the fairness of election and whether it will constitute some evidence for a lawsuit, how that information will be gathered?
Yeah, so that's a great question. That's something that we're working on. We are at Fair Election Center, a partner with the Election Protection Group. So there's it's a coalition of a number of organizations focused on doing this work. So first and foremost, I'd like to plug, there's hotlines. So anybody who's seeing issues at their polling place or hearing of issues is strongly encouraged to call. You can check all of the hotlines at protectthevote.net, but the main one is 866-OUR-VOTE. There's also others in different languages. So the election protection hotline is a really valuable tool there, but we are also doing training for our fellows specifically to give them some tools so that they know how to respond to specific instances of voter intimidation and other illegal behavior at the polling place. And then exactly as you say, a big part of that is recording it, is taking down contact information, and is gathering the information that we would need so that if necessary, our lawyers can take action and file a lawsuit if it comes to that. Although hopefully, we'll be able to correct those things. Hopefully it's a problem of misunderstanding and not of malice, but in cases where there's a refusal to remedy illegal behavior, then we are providing trainings to our fellows so that they are prepared to gather the information that we would need to pursue that.
So you have 143 people throughout the country and about 30 or so staff in Washington, D.C. But election is taking place. What I don't know how many polling locations you think there are? Maybe 300,000 plus.
It's a good question. I don't have a number off the top of my head, but yes, a whole lot more than we have staff and fellows. We do also, of course, have our democracy fellows, which is also a project of Campus Vote Project, parallel to the student poll worker team. So we have, more than that, but even if we had 1,000 or 2,000, we would not have nearly enough to observe every polling place. So there's, I think, two things that I would say to that. First is that we are in specific states. We're not evenly spread across the country. So we have better coverage in especially student-heavy areas, especially in urban areas, especially in about a dozen states that are, we think, very important, are likely to be contested heavily, are likely to be sites of a lot of illegal voter intimidation because of the stakes in the election. So we are more heavily focused on those. And beyond that, I mentioned the election protection group that we're a part of. So anyone who's interested, I would strongly encourage to go to protectthevote.net and sign up to be a poll watcher. You can also go to powerthepolls.org/CVP to sign up to be a poll worker, although of course many jurisdictions are reaching capacity there. But if you're interested in being a poll watcher as a volunteer, you can go through protectthevote.net and sign up to receive trainings locally at the state level about how to be a poll watcher and to make sure that you have the legal resources you need to ensure that the law is being followed at your polling place.
So, President Trump has been encouraging people to go and observe elections and make sure there is no fraud taking place. So you got 143 people. He probably has armies of people who are going to show up. So what are the contingency plans? So there are poll watchers who are authorized. They have filled in the form. They're sitting inside and keeping an eye, right?
Something like that. So
people who are not authorized and they're showing up, and some of them may show up with guns. So are you trained how to deal with guns?
Yeah, so in any case in which one of our poll watchers would be placing themselves in danger, we would not ask or encourage or want them to intervene directly. If there's a situation in which someone would be in personal danger, then I would not ask that person to take personal action. What someone can do, though, is keep track of what's happening, keep notes, keep recordings, get the contact information of people who are being adversely impacted by what may be, in some states, illegal voter intimidation, whoever might be performing that. And so it's difficult to remedy something like that. And it can be very challenging. There's a lot of local and state level laws that complicate the situation. There's a lot of things that are legal in one place and illegal in another. There's a lot of things that maybe should be illegal but aren't, and vice versa. But I think that one thing that we can all do is make sure that in cases where it's a case of misunderstanding and not, again, of malice, in that case, it's very easy to remedy because you just have to give someone the right information. And in cases where there is intentionally illegal voter intimidation happening, we can do everything we can to remedy that in the moment. And moreover, we can take steps so that we can follow up adequately and ensure that to the greatest extent possible, everyone's right to vote is respected and there's a solution to that problem and people are able to vote at another time if they're not able to vote for an illegal reason initially.
So there was a news item yesterday that in Pennsylvania, some people showed up with the regarding videos of those people who are dropping off their ballots. Is that a voter intimidation? Are you trained to observe that?
So I'm sorry, there were people observing others as they went to drop their ballots?
So in Pennsylvania, where the early vote drop boxes were there were other people video recording everyone who was dropping off ballots. Will that be considered an intimidation?
That's a good question. So I am not a lawyer and I don't know the law in Pennsylvania. That said, I think that would likely not be a form of voter intimidation if you're passively recording.
You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Spencer Reed, and we'll be right back after these messages.
My wife, who she's a professor at the University of Cincinnati, who's Catholic, and by her watching and listening to our 3-year-old son watch Adam's World, she ended up taking Kalima Shahada. She embraced Islam because she learned so much about Islam and the other prophets. It really affected our life in a great way, and because of Sound Vision and Adam's World, we're Muslims.
I took my Shahada 15 years ago, and I actually am from a rural part of Ohio. And so I found the catalog for Sound Vision, and I ordered the tapes and the CDs and the books, and I used those, and especially for my little daughter, that's how we basically learned our Islam, and Islam entered our hearts through the wonderful works of Sound Vision.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. I just want you to know that I love the Sound Vision website, that a lot of times when I'm looking for information, especially as it relates to homelessness, domestic violence, and women issues, I go to that website, and then I see what you've written, and then I copy and paste it, and spread the word, because the wisdom is there, so I can't do any better than what Sound Vision has already done.
Sound Vision is our survival guide. It is the organization that provides skills for Muslims how to survive and thrive in this community here in the U.S.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Anam, I'm in 11th grade, and I grew up with Adam's World, and what it taught me was unity, respect, and love for the Muslim Ummah.
Adam's World is the greatest show ever made. Take me to the Kaaba, man. I love that puppet.
Assalamu alaikum!
Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe, and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with young political activist Spencer Reed. Tell me this, are you trained, your team is trained to video record some evidence as well? Because that seems to be a major way of understanding and mobilizing in any political situation in last few years.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that we strongly encourage people to take all the steps they can to record anything they have questions about or think might be a problem. When in doubt, I would definitely encourage people to record it. There may be some jurisdictions where it depends on where exactly you are, but to the greatest extent possible, would encourage folks to record anything they might have concerns about.
So you're national manager of student poll workers, and how many other organizations which are doing this similar type of work?
Focused on student poll worker recruitment in particular?
Yeah.
So there's a number of organizations. There are, I would say, 3 or 4 other national organizations doing fairly similar work in particular. There's Campus Compact has quite a similar program. All In Democracy Challenge has some similar work. Andrew Goodman Foundation. There are a few other organizations like that that do a lot of student and campus organizing and have made an effort to recruit poll workers. I would say that Campus Compact is the most similar to our model of directly recruiting through student fellows.
So there has been an effort in the past that voting age should be changed again. So what are your thoughts about that?
That's a great question. So, of course, as always, speaking only for myself and not for my employer, my organization, I would say that personally, I tend to support that. I think that it makes sense to lower the voting age for a number of reasons, one of which is just that the best predictor of voting behavior is whether you voted before. So people who vote habitually. They will continue to vote, and people who don't get into that habit early are less likely to vote. So if we are committed to building a culture of strong democratic participation, which I think we should be, then I think one of the best ways to do that is to give access to the ballot to people who are younger so that they can start to build that habit earlier. They can feel that they have a stake and a voice in our elections, and that will, I think, broaden the scope of our political discussions. I think give a voice to young people who are interested in expressing that voice and give people the opportunity to build the habit of participation early.
Well, the Muslim community is normally considered the least registered to vote in America. They seem to be more skeptic of political processes and all that. So have you encountered in your experience in your organization or around you, younger people from the Muslim community who, according to surveys, are least registered and least politically active? Have you met some of them?
I have. I've seen, due to the nature of my work, I'm more likely to encounter people who are very highly engaged than people who are very disengaged. But I think that for many communities, and absolutely including the Muslim community in the United States, for a lot of reasons, including active attempts at disenfranchisement, including a sense that our government does not work for all people equally, I think that there's a feeling among many people and among many young people that it's not worth engaging, that we're not going to be able to change anything. But I've also seen people challenge that, and I've seen people feel the power of collective action, see what we can do when we do stand together and when we do take action. And I've seen that from people of all religions and ethnic groups and races and backgrounds and classes and ages. And I think that's a really powerful thing that has the ability to challenge the feeling of apathy that many of us experience.
You mentioned that part of your job is to deal with those who are disengaged. How do you find out where are the disengaged people?
So I think I always say that it's important to meet people where they are, both literally and figuratively. And I think that when we're talking about students in particular, the students are there, and the good news is that there's networks of students, there's communities of students that span all levels of political engagement. So when we have highly engaged student fellows, by far the best way to engage others other students is to use those students themselves, because their friends are the ones who are disengaged. Their classmates and their peers and their colleagues and their the other people that they interact with on their campus are the people that we're talking about there. So by far the strongest thing that any of us can do to influence anyone else's behavior, whether that's their likelihood of voting or of taking other actions, is to have a personal conversation with them, especially if it's someone that we actually know directly ourselves. That has an enormous impact. And so I think that the process of engaging young people requires using the power of young people to reach each other and ourselves. That when I reach out to a friend of mine who I know doesn't take politics seriously, who I know feels their voice doesn't matter, who I know habitually doesn't vote, I've been able to have really valuable conversations there that I know I would not have been able to have if I was a stranger calling them, and certainly would not have been able to have if it was just based on an ad they saw on TV and immediately tuned out because there's another politician talking about something I don't care about.
Tell me this, how you're keeping yourself safe? I know young people are bolder than older people, but in this pandemic, we are told that older people are less vulnerable, but they carry the pandemic bug, COVID-19 with them. So how you guys are keeping yourself safe and other people safe while working on the election?
Absolutely. So I think that, of course, the first thing is that to the greatest extent possible, we want everything to be remote. Where possible, we want to avoid that. But that said, for this election, the fact is there are millions of people who will be voting next Tuesday on November 3rd in person for any number of reasons, because they were unable to vote early, because they don't have the option legally, because they just want to do that. Whatever the reason is, I think it's important that those people have the right to vote in a free, fair, and safe election, and with the minimum possible risk. So this is why I think the recruitment of poll workers is such a crucial thing, or one of the reasons. Not only does it solve a problem of voter disenfranchisement in the form of these long lines, but when we have fewer people, when we have fewer poll workers, that means we have fewer open polling places, and the ones that are open are less well organized, less well run, less safe. So you have more people coming from farther away to stay for longer in the same place, which is an increased risk of COVID to voters, to poll workers, and to everybody else, because of course those risks don't stay in one place. So I think our best chance to avoid this election becoming a super spreader event is to have a large number of extremely well-functioning and well-run polling places open in as many places in as many communities and neighborhoods as possible in this country, so that everyone who chooses to vote has the option to do so, again, in a free, fair, and safe election.
But isn't this little late, because different states have different rules, and some places they have more places? I mean, in some cities it is reported people waited for 8 hours to vote, and they have been timing and live streaming their experience there. So I think the time to have as many places to vote, to vote, I think is already gone. So in current situation, are you providing safety equipment to your people? Are they distributing to other people? Because once you're voting, the same place, people will be touching different things, handing over your ID, to taking the ballot, to casting the ballot, putting the handles over there. This is a huge experience of touching. I think they're good. There may be about 15 touch points, including the door opening, closing the door, and all of those things, and social distancing issues. So, are your people trained to keep themselves safe?
Yes, absolutely. So I think this is a great and very important point. It is the case that most polling places are locked in. They're going to happen or they're not going to happen, although there's always the possibility of emergency polling place closures due to a lack of poll workers if people don't show up, et cetera, which is a huge problem that we want to avoid. So I think that from my perspective, there are a few things that are in our control. And the first and foremost, and the one that my team has been focused on, is the number of actual poll workers. Because if we don't have that, nothing else matters. If you don't have a poll worker there, you can't operate a polling place. So that's the thing we've been focused on. As far as personal protective equipment goes, there are a number of organizations nationally, groups like the Healthy Elections Project, that have been working to help facilitate the provision of PPE to local election officials and to polling places. And on both counts of polling workers and PPE, we are at the very least in a much, much, much stronger position than we were during the primaries when this was initially hitting, and then it looked like we were going to be even just a few weeks or months ago. So there will be issues on election day, because there always are. It's not easy, I think, for anybody to coordinate at this level, and it's all done locally. So when you have millions of people doing the same thing all at once, things can get a little bit messy. But the bottom line is, I think that in the overwhelming majority of precincts and of counties and states, there will be plenty of poll workers and more than enough personal protective equipment. That's not to say there won't be issues on both counts in some places, but I think that the way our country has stepped up across the board to provide both of those has been extremely impressive and very effective. Beyond that, one of the great challenges is, because of that local administration, we are already hearing reports of some polling places that are failing to even follow their actual mandated safety requirements from their county and from their state. So in cases like that, that's an example of a situation in which we would want to know about that. We would want to intervene. We would want to talk through the 866-hour vote, the election protection hotline. But
what is that hotline, by the way?
It's so the overall the general hotline is 866-hour vote, but you can see all of the different ones at protectthevote.net. And specifically, if it's helpful, I can say the other language options. There's in Spanish 888 Ve y Vota, VEYVOTA. In a number of Asian languages, including Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, Bengali, Hindi, Urdu, and Tagalog, there is an option to call 888 API vote. And finally, there's an Arabic option, which is 844 Yalla US, 844 YALLA US. So those are the different hotlines for the Election Protection Coalition. So if folks are experiencing issues on election day or in early voting that they believe might be, especially that they believe might be in a form of illegal voter intimidation, a failure to follow the law, or just something else that they need help with, that's a great place to call.
Now, so you got probably millions of hand sanitizers and all that.
Not me personally, I don't have any in my apartment here, but there have been millions and millions of masks and hand sanitizers and other things like that that have been distributed to polling places across the country by a very wide number of organizations and government agencies.
Before voter entered, they need to sanitize their hand, and as soon as they are done, they need to sanitize, because otherwise it's going to be a major problem. Tell me about, voter intimidation is one thing, but then there is a serious risk of violence. Our organization itself has been busy in training people in that particular area with the help of different Cure Violence and other Carter Center and things like that. We had one training yesterday as well. So what type of trainings people are offering? Because, conflict is high, divisions are high, emotions are very high. Not only that, but people are buying guns. I mean, in swing state, gun purchases are increased by 80%. And it is not just the traditional people buying guns. People who have never touched a gun, they're worried about what's going to happen after election, and they're thinking, should I go and buy guns? And popular guns are flying off the shelves like the toilet paper was flying off the shelf in the beginning of pandemic. So in that particular environment, people who are concerned about election, fair elections and all of that, what type of trainings they are providing? Are you personally trained by any of these training how to deal with possible election-related violence?
That's a great question. That's not something that I and my organization are focused on specifically. I think that it's something that I feel is best left to people who really know what they're doing on that, to learn about de-escalation. Fundamentally, I think is one of the most important tools there. And I would love to hear more from you, what your organization has been doing. I will also say, I think that while we should absolutely be prepared for every eventuality, and by far the worst thing that we could see happening on election day would be instances of violence related to the election, related to polling places, et cetera. And there has absolutely been a very real and concerning rise in political violence overall across this country. Generally, polling places have been quite safe. And I think that it's also important that we not scare people out of going to vote, that we not give people the impression that they're very likely to face violence if they go to vote, because fortunately at this point in this country, that's not the case. And I think that we should do everything we can to preserve that status and make sure that that does not become the case by providing that sort of training, by teaching de-escalation skills, by teaching intervention skills. But I think we should also emphasize to everyone that voting really is, both in the pandemic sense and in the sense of other people, quite a safe activity in the United States today. And so I would encourage everyone to not hesitate to vote for those reasons.
Yeah, sometimes, news and media and social media echoing about the possibility of violence probably goes ahead and increases the possibility of violence. But it's realistic also. I mean, the militia trying to kidnap the Michigan governor and all these statistics about people buying guns, those are real things. So there need to be a balance between not panicking and not being caught off guard. So sometimes these things are in the news, but have you personally or any of the person working with you has encountered what you might consider intentional, some type of election-related fraud or intimidation directly? Is it coming on your horizon, personally speaking, or your staff-wise?
Personally speaking, that's not something that I've encountered. For my staff, I think that across the board, what I've heard is that there's definitely been many people who I've heard from who face all sorts of harassment and other, inappropriate, unacceptable behavior targeted at them, especially online, especially on the basis of things like their race and religion and their gender. But so far, and of course it's still early in the early voting process this year, I personally have not heard direct reports of that sort of thing happening to anyone at a polling place. I have seen instances of what of laws being broken, of for instance in states where it's illegal to have law enforcement within a certain area, having that happening, having other instances of certainly electioneering is a very common thing where we have people, performing partisan activities within 100 feet of a polling place, which is illegal. Things like that we absolutely see. There's always instances where laws are broken, but I have not so far this year seen instances that I find extremely concerning. I have not seen instances of genuine violence or other things of that sort at polling places.
So the reason I ask this question, sometimes a impression is formed, one news item, and it's circulated all over and repeated. Sometimes there is a tendency of violence that if happening in place, copycat incidents or more people thinking about it because more people are talking about it. So in person, you have not seen any. Neither have I. And probably the whole lot of people. So election most likely are going to be, proper elections, most likely fair elections, most likely hardly any fraud. Most elections in the past, fraud has not been a problem. Research shows that, studies show that. But this time, because of this conflicting position and all of that, people are getting worried about it thoroughly. But so far, it's not there. If we keep it that way, it will not be there. And so in that way, work which you're doing in your organization is extremely critical. Tell me about this. What will you do once election is over? Will you be out of job?
That's a great question. So I'm lucky enough to have my current employment at least through the end of the year, where we'll be wrapping up our work and making sure that all of our fellows are supported as we end this program. And after that, it's a little bit up in the air. I'm still trying to figure out what I'll be doing next. But there's a lot of interesting things happening that I'm looking forward to getting involved with.
So, the elections are amazing in our country, probably in other countries also. There is an election cycle. People are engaged. And when you're working for Bernie Sanders, now you're working for a not-for-profit, but you are in election cycle. You devote a whole lot of time doing that. And once it's over, here are a huge number of people who are thinking what to do other than taking a short vacation and relaxing a little bit. So it becomes a major question. How cyclically people survive doing that? That every election cycle, there are people who dedicate themselves. Do they make enough money to last when there is downtime? How does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a very difficult thing, and I think that exactly is one of the main reasons why political professionals are not representative of the general population. You're much more likely to look like me as a young white man from a fairly elite school. I have the flexibility to be able to take risks like that, and a lot of people don't have that flexibility. And a lot of people who do take those risks face that exact problem, are out of work for long periods of time, or just have to go into a different field or take different types of work. So a lot of people end up doing work, part-time or in the service or food industry, things like that. It can be very difficult and challenging. And I think that we have seen a real improvement in the conditions of campaign staff and political professionals in general in the last several years. The rise personally, and again, as always, speaking for myself only, but I've seen the rise of unionization of campaigns has been a very salutary event, I think, and has led to better pay, better working conditions, more reasonable hours. As I'm sure you know, there's a tendency of campaigns and of political organizations generally to burn through people pretty quickly, to expect extremely long hours for very, very little pay and no benefits. That started to change. It's still not what I would call a sustainable lifestyle. I think that there's a reason that most of the people doing this work are often, especially the work right out on the front lines in organizing and so forth, are often younger, because you do it for a couple of years and then you realize, I'm starting to hit this point where like, I don't know if I can do this forever. It's a little bit exhausting. It's important, and that's what keeps us going. But that is a very real challenge that a lot of people face. Personally, I've been pretty lucky and have not been adversely impacted by it too much, but that lack of stability is a real source of stress and difficulty for many people.
Unless you get the ultimate prize, become a congressman, and you have salary for the rest of your life.
Exactly there. Or if you
health coverage and everything else.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Or there are plenty of people who go cash in at who end up, if you don't get elected yourself, you go work, for a lobbyist or whatever, or something like that. Personally, no intention of doing that, but
thank you so much, Spencer Reed. I truly appreciate that.
Thank you.
Spencer Reed is National Manager of Student Poll Workers at Fair Election Center. And thank you, Sherdil Khan and Dr. Abdul Wahid, for organizing today's show. You have been watching Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, Apple TV, and our own website, muslimnetwork.tv. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. Peace and salam.